From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made about 1 year ago when President Trump announced aggressive tariffs on Canadian products. The president said then that Canada was not being a good neighbor and they would be punished for it. Within 24 hours, a number of cross-border contracts were being canceled or were in jeopardy. One of the early casualties was American alcohol, bourbon, liquor, and wine especially. But as it turns out, it wasn't just the cross-border commerce. It was the tourism. According to the U.S. Congress Joint Economic Committee, 2025 saw a 22% decline in Canadian travelers coming here. That's roughly 4 million fewer Canadian travelers in the United States in 1 year. And the Finger Lakes wine and tourism industry was hit hard by that collapse. And then there's the question of who is drinking and who is not. Alcohol consumption in the U.S. has hit an 86-year low, with only 54% of adults describing themselves as regular drinkers. That's a 13-point drop since 2022 alone, according to Pew Research. And there is Gen Z in particular. The number of Gen Z drinkers is 20% fewer than millennials, and millennials were already drinking less than the previous generation. So these are not easy times for the wine industry. One of the key economic drivers in our region, and it has spurred some to get creative, others to think about selling. There are more legacy wineries listed for sale right now than at any time since I've been covering the region. But our guests today have no interest in getting out. They want to bring more people in, and we're going to talk about what they are doing to try to do exactly that. In studio with us, Brian Durnin is Vice President of Hospitality and Entertainment at Point of the Bluff Vineyards. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Matt Cassavaugh is the winemaker at 20 Deep Winery. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Evan.
And Chad Hendrickson is on the line with us. He's the Vice President of Sales for Keuka Spring Vineyards. Chad, welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'll start with you, Chad. You were one of the first people I talked to a year ago when the tariffs hit, because at that time, some of the work you were doing was cross-border, and there were questions about possible deals getting scuttled, not getting done. Can you describe what was going on then, and then we're going to kind of get into what's happened in the last year. But what happened a year ago?
Well, yeah. So a year ago, first off, the New York State wine industry had a really nice deal set up through USDA and the New York Wine and Grape Foundation, where we had a partnership with getting our wines into various parts of Canada, one of which being Ontario. And at the time, I was with another winery, and we were just about to get our wines on the ground in Ontario. And we all know where the tariffs came into play and shut down any kind of movement for us to get product into the country, and it really never came back. And as we all know, since then, there's really no American wines or liquors being sold in Canada, and that really never came back for us. So it just died.
So, Chad, in other words, Chad, in those early weeks when this was going on a year ago, there would be pictures that kind of went viral on social media of Canadian stores where the American shelves had been essentially emptied and that they weren't selling.
Right.
And there were just Canadian flags there in their place. That's not apocryphal. That really was going on, and you think that continues to go on?
Oh, for sure, it continues to go on. Our from the wine industry standpoint, our relationship is still strong with the brokers, the distributors, the purchasers of those wine shops. Right? They recognize that we're making a viable product, but it's simply just not getting on the shelf, and the consumers are choosing not to purchase it even if it was on the shelf. So, it's happening to this day for sure.
Canadians are very determined. Matt Cassavaugh, did you experience anything like that with 20 Deep?
So we're a much smaller brand.
How many cases a year for you guys?
About 3,000 to 5,000.
Okay.
So we rely a lot less on the export market. In fact, we're entirely sold domestically, and most of our sales go directly out of our tasting room. So we don't see any ebbs and flows in the export market affecting our business directly. We focus kind of more on our local community and try to draw from the town of Mendon mostly, but also the city of Rochester more broadly.
And do you get the sense, Matt, I mean, certainly everybody wants to grow, or not everybody wants to grow to a certain level, but there's a lot of desire to grow. And if you want to grow as a winery, you often do end up looking at export markets. For you guys, are you comfortable in the size and space that you're in? Do you think you can sustain?
Yeah, I think that wineries do better when they focus on what they're good at. And for some brands, that's growth. And for others, it's more person-to-person connections. So,
Okay. And Brian, before we get to what's going on now with you guys, take me back a year ago. And, I don't know if the cross-border commerce was hurting you, but certainly the tourism probably ended up hurting you. Tell me the story.
Yeah. We really noticed it throughout the year last year. Tourism was down at a number of our properties. We have the winery proper. We have a restaurant down in Hammondsport. We have some accommodations as well, and then we have a concert lineup. And we noticed that our Canadian tourism, looking at the data, really did drop out quite a bit. And, similar to what Matt said, we don't have a lot of export at this point, but we focus on what we do well, which is trying to create experiences for people. So seeing that drop in tourism, definitely affected us.
Yeah, certainly the Finger Lakes region will always draw a lot from Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse. I mean, that's like the one tank or less, or can you take a trip in a day and get home? Can you do an overnight stay that's pretty brief? That will always be there. But you're not that far from Canada. And I didn't realize until the last year, and I've covered the industry for this long, I didn't realize quite how important the Canadian tourism side of it was to you guys. How significant to you?
It depends on the location. I can't tell you specific numbers,
Sure.
but, our concert series last year, we saw no purchases out of 24,000 tickets that we sold. No purchases coming from Canada. Zero.
Zero?
Yep. And
What
that
would
doesn't
have been
mean
more typical? Hundreds?
100. Yeah, 100-ish.
So
somewhere.
it went to zero.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's not make or break for us, but, it contributes to, the bottom line.
Yeah,
So,
when things are already tough, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Matt, are you aware of Canadians coming down to you guys?
So we're set up more, I would say, like a locals neighborhood spot than we are positioned to capitalize on tourism necessarily. We kind of open up traditionally right around like the time that a wine bar would open up. So people come and visit us after work for events to meet up with their friends more than when they're on a trip. So it hasn't really ebbed and flowed our business that much, the lack of Canadian tourism. I think that we started our business with the idea of focusing on locals and neighborhoods and getting really strong connections with people that live close to us. And I think that the way the climate is, we've decided to double down on that and keep that as our core focus instead of maybe broadening it out.
Interesting. Yeah. And Chad, you've been in the industry for a number of years now. How important are Canadian tourists to the places you've been?
They're pretty important. I mean, I really focus on wholesale for quite a while now, and those off-premise, those stores that border Canada certainly saw a giant dip, and they still do see a dip in sales because their Canadian neighbors aren't crossing the border and shopping with them. Locally here in the Finger Lakes, I think everybody's pretty spot on that they're not crossing the border and coming through. So it's definitely a dent. The size of the dent, in tasting rooms, I don't think is quite as significant as the lack of purchasing at the off-premise liquor store and wine shops. That's been a pretty big blow for those stores that flank Canada. So
sure. And in a moment, we're going to talk more about alcohol consumption more broadly, and then what our guests think, the smart things for their own business, the plan for their business to weather anything that's coming. Because, maybe you're a smaller winery that mostly focuses on local. Maybe you're trying to do 100,000 cases and really, really grow. There's a lot of different sizes in the region. There's a lot of different goals in terms of business, and it's not an easy time. But briefly, Chad, what would you say would have to happen to get some of those cross-border sales back? What needs to happen first?
Boy, that's a much larger political question, right? I think that we need to be more welcoming, I guess, would be the nicest way to say it, and let them know that the area still respects them and wants them here, and above and beyond just their purchasing power, that there's no real beef with Canada in my eyes, and I think that just just really being more welcoming in general would start to change the narrative a little bit. But I do think it's going to be a long-term shift. I think the damage has been done, and it's going to take quite some time for us to see the amount of Canadian tourists that we saw in the past back. But we've got to start somewhere, and I think that's the best way to do it is some sort of campaign saying, we would love to see you back. So
a little ad campaign, a little making nice with the Canadian neighbors.
Right.
Now, Canadians are famously very fiery and very rude. So I think it's going to be a hard sell, Chad. No, look, come on. I feel like we should be able to do this. But on the bigger picture, Chad, Pew Research says alcohol consumption in the United States is at an 86-year low. That's kind of hard to believe in 2026, given the fact that the pandemic saw a surge. One of the few places you would go in the early months of the pandemic where things were hopping was your local liquor stores, because people were sort of planning out their days that way. And now it's a very, very different story 5-6 years later. What have you, I'll ask all three of you this. Chad, I'll start with you. What have you experienced in that way? Are you noticing it? Are you feeling it?
Oh, for sure. Definitely feeling it. Definitely noticing the dip in sales on a broader market. And there's, I hear everything, all sorts of reasons behind that dip. Things I wouldn't have thought of initially, like, a high Ozempic use, and people don't seem to like, or don't, the alcohol and Ozempic use don't seem to match. Marijuana, right? Recreational marijuana, that recreational dollars being consumed elsewhere. I've heard about online gambling being an issue as well. But I also personally think it's probably because folks don't have the money, right? I mean, we all know utility bills are skyrocketing. That just cost of living is high, and you've got to kind of choose how you're going to spend your money. So I think it's a broad ranging wave that's causing this, and I think that it's going to be a slow recovery. But I do think we will recover. I think the alcohol industry and the wine industry ebbs and flows, and right now we're just in a dip. So,
but that recovery is an interesting point, Chad, because as I mentioned, having covered the Finger Lakes wine industry for 20 years now, I don't remember seeing this many legacy wineries for sale. And it's not 50 wineries, but it's a handful of pretty big names if people see them. And probably there's discussions about other wineries that have to make decisions on, do we have kids who can take over? Is there a way to sell? Is there a way to stay? Yeah. And those hard decisions will be probably coming in the next 12 to 24 months for a number of other places. So is there, I hate to use this word, it feels very corporate-y, but Chad, is there a right sizing going on? Was the industry a little big? Was it saturated? How do you see that?
I do think that, you touched on it earlier, that the pandemic sales were astronomical for everybody, and a lot of alcohol producers ramped up accordingly and really didn't see this coming. So it was a quick slap in the face, and that correction has been very painful for a lot of places. But I think that there are 2 points to be made here. There's the correcting for an overproduction for what turned out to be a quick high wave of sales. And then there's also succession planning, where a lot of the industry is aging out and looking to, bring in the younger generation. And those are almost 2 separate conversations. I think that the businesses that ramped up very quickly and expected those, long-term high sales just got caught off guard. And we're definitely seeing that repositioning in the market. I also think that at least locally, some of the businesses that are coming up for sale are because there isn't really a succession plan in place. And, the kids just don't want to get into the business. And I understand that, right? It's hard to get into a business that right now is suffering. But I think that there's opportunity to be had in that as well, right? I think that folks who have the opportunity and the means to position themselves correctly right now are going to ride a wave up when it happens. So,
well, let's ask our guest in studio here. Brian, how long you been with Point of the Bluffs?
11 years now.
Okay, and how many cases a year are you guys making?
We're around 3,000 to 5,000 as well.
Okay, so similar, smaller size. Chad, I should also ask you, what is the size of case output at Keuka Spring where you are?
We're about 15,000 right
15,
now.
yeah. So I guess in the region that's a mid-size.
Yeah.
And so, Brian, what have you noticed in the last 5-6 years? What has that wave been like?
Through COVID, we had some really great years. Obviously, 2020 was hard for everybody. Coming out of COVID, though, was really strong for us, and we saw our best years ever at Point of the Bluff. Last year, definitely things started to change a little bit. We noticed busy days were not as busy as they had been. Average spend was down. We also noticed...
So people were buying fewer bottles when they were buying?
Yeah, and actually when we dug into it a little bit more, we realized not necessarily fewer bottles, but maybe one more expensive bottle rather than 6 inexpensive bottles. So, and that sort of, made us lean into our thinking of, people are chasing story and experience. And I think some of the larger wineries that are selling now are... they don't necessarily have that unique story behind them, but some of the smaller startups, like you guys have, there's a handful of new wineries that have started in the last 2 years now in the Finger Lakes. So I think the story behind the smaller wineries is something that people are really chasing.
What makes for a market to be saturated, and what makes it for it to be sort of at equilibrium, for lack of a better word, and where do you think the Finger Lakes is?
That's a great question. I don't know that we're saturated. I think it's a time for businesses to pivot, and it's, we've been forced to pivot. We were forced to pivot through COVID, and now we're forced to pivot now. And it's just a practice in, good business. And if you're able to pivot and find the right, niche, you can survive. And if you can't, maybe you can't. You sell or whatever. So.
Okay. Well, Matt, you guys have no intention of selling. You feel like you're at the model that you need to be to weather whatever comes?
Yeah, I think so. We are still a young winery, so we're still a developing business, and we haven't really seen a slowing to our development. We've been building more connections with more people in our neighborhood throughout the years, and our wine club sales have been growing. That being said, I think that the impact of the market conditions right now are variable based a lot on how big your winery is. The bigger wineries that really need the export market, that really need to compete on liquor store shelves, are a little bit more vulnerable, and smaller businesses, I think, have a little bit more wiggle room to kind of stay nimble on their feet and react to the market conditions and kind of try to make changes to their business to stay relevant. And we're a really small business, and it allows us to kind of sell experiences and sell personal relationships a lot more, where it's hard to do that when you're selling 100,000 cases of wine. It's difficult to connect with every customer. But when people are coming in and you're actually seeing them face to face, and, we have a big glass door in our tasting room where people can look through the glass door and watch me make wine. They can look out the tasting room window and look at our vines and watch us work on the vines. Don't they? And I think it's important because it creates a connection in their mind that makes them want to return. And I think that's been one of the strengths of the Finger Lakes for a long time and that's why I think that we're going to be able to survive this little dip in tourism, is because when people come here, it leaves an impression. It makes them want to come back. And I think that's always been one of the strengths of the region. And I think that that's going to continue to be a strength of the region. And I think we're going to be able to bounce back from this. And, in reality, I feel like this conversation has been going on in various forms for a really long time. And because it's farming, and that's not that easy. So we're just used to seeing different challenges come up. And I think the industry as a whole is pretty good at being resilient.
Well, let me get some feedback from listeners. And then in our second half hour, these are 3 different places with different business models and approaches. And, for example, if you've never been to Point of the Bluff, you'd be surprised to hear some of the big names that they get, some of the music that comes in, and some of what they are trying to do to attract people. And every year I see your list, I'm like, whoa. But that's about obviously connecting with people. It's also about survival. So we'll talk about all those things coming up here. Roger emails us to say, my sister lives in the same small county in Kentucky that Maker's Mark bourbon is made. She laments the negative impact that tariffs and insults levied against the Canadian people have had on the local economy there. Maker's Mark used to be a reliable employer in the area. Now people are concerned about whether the bourbon industry is ever going to fully recover. That is from Roger. Brett emails to say, Evan, we need a lower alcohol wine. People my age don't want to be drunk after a glass or two. All right, let's talk a little bit about that one from Brett, because there is research on this. Gen Z is drinking a lot less. We mentioned that Gen Z is part of this 86-year low in U.S. adult drinking. And that, by the way, means, do people self-identify as drinkers? Do people have more than one drink a week? That kind of a thing. So I know there's different definitions, but we're at a very low point. And Gen Z doesn't drink a lot. They don't drink a ton of wine. Brett says, I don't know Brett's age, but Brett says we need lower alcohol wine. And one thing that Pew and others have found when they talk to Gen Z is they often say that. They want either NA or lower alcohol offerings. Now, the cool thing about Riesling and the cool thing about a lot of, sort of cool climate winemaking is this lends itself perhaps to significantly less alcohol. So let me ask our guests about that. Brian, do people bring that up? Is that a point of conversation in your business?
Yes, we have talked about that.
Okay.
Athletic beer, I think, was like the number one growing beverage brand last year, or, in the past couple of years. The products taste really good. If you like beer, it's convincing that you're drinking a real beer. And
did you say it was Athletic Beer?
Athletic Beer Company or Athletic Brewing.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
It's tasty if you like beer.
Okay.
It's non-alcoholic. So we've talked internally about adding an NA product to our lineup, and our winemaker and I have gone in depth about it. Ownership would really like to do it. Our winemaker's reluctant, and I'm sure you have a perspective on this, but a lot of the body from wine comes from the alcohol. So if you strip the alcohol out of it, you don't have any body in your wine. So, and there are ways to do it, but from what I've heard and what I've tasted, to make a tasty non-alcoholic wine is really challenging, or there's not really a commercially viable way to do it yet.
Okay, so that's the NA side. I also want to talk about the low alcohol side. I'll also say that when I was growing up, and please, if O'Doul's is still made, don't sue me. I don't want a lawsuit from O'Doul's. Is it? They still making O'Doul's, producer Megan Mac? I bet you they are. And you know what? I'm sure it's great these days. When I was growing up, it was not considered, like really good beer. But again, maybe it's great now. And every lawyer should know that I mean that very sincerely. Now, having said that, there have been big advancements in NA cocktails, and we've covered that on this program. There's Alt Bar in Rochester. There's a lot of NA cocktails on a lot of lists, like really good lists. They're not just Shirley Temples, and there's a lot of interesting things they're doing to create body and flavor and some cool combinations. Wine, I've been a little less sold on. I've had some NA wine. It's drinkable, and I love, if you've ever been on a press pad and just grab the free run juice when they're pressing Riesling. It's one of the greatest things in the world. So you figure there's maybe a market for something out there. But what about lower alcohol, Brian? What about what do you say to that?
Yeah, so we've looked at that a little bit as well. It's not something we've gotten into yet. I know at least one winery in the Finger Lakes has that I don't know is released yet, so I don't want to put it on the air. But yeah, it's something we've talked about. We just haven't gotten too far into it yet. We'll probably continue to explore it because I think this will be around for a little while, at least the new market of wine drinker, something that, we can cater to if we need to.
Okay. Matt Cassavaugh is the winemaker on the panel. He's a winemaker at 20 Deep. So Brett writes to say, we need lower alcohol wine. People my age don't want to be drunk after a glass or two. What do you say to Brett?
So as Evan pointed out, I think the Finger Lakes in general has wines that don't end up being as heavily alcoholic as some warmer wine regions. So we don't usually make wines that are up in like the 15% alcohol. A lot of our aromatic whites come in at 10% or less just naturally, just in the styles that we think they show best in to begin with. I also think that one way that we try to lean into this is by creating an environment that people feel more comfortable just drinking less in. A lot of our more successful events aren't really built necessarily completely around alcohol. For example, we do an Easter egg hunt every year in the vineyard, and it's more of a family event. And the parents do have a mimosa or a glass or two of wine, but it's a way to get people in the door and interacting with us through events that aren't completely built around drinking. And I think that that's really helped us kind of lay the groundwork for then selling bottles of wine that they might take home to their Easter dinner later or something like that. So the event isn't built around wine, but I do think it leads to wine sales eventually in the future. So we've been leaning into things like that. We do a Sunday bingo for children and families that a lot of people come in for, and we sell probably less wine than we would at, say, a concert, but it's still a way to get people in the door and to keep things moving and to stay relevant in the community and to just meet people in the neighborhood. So
Yeah, and Matt, when I was kind of starting out writing a lot more about the industry and hanging out more on press pads, I was learning a lot about, and I don't want to get too wonky, but I actually think this is kind of a cool thing for those of us who like wine but aren't in the industry. It was cool to learn that there's different ways. For example, you're making a Riesling, and you want to have a little sugar in the Riesling, which, by the way, does not mean it's not a good wine. Let's get over that. There's great wine. There are some of the best wines in the world have a lot of residual sugar. You can ferment all of the natural sugar in the grape juice to alcohol, and then you can add bags of domino sugar. You can back sweeten is what they call it, and then you can choose whatever alcohol number you want. That's why for a long time, even sweeter Finger Lakes Rieslings were still like 12.5 alcohol, because that was kind of a number that a lot of people were looking for, and you can back sweeten to that. Or what you could do is you could just stop fermentation before all the sugar is gone and keep some of the natural sugar in. And that's why a lot of German Rieslings come in around 7, 8, 9% alcohol, because they stopped fermentation, and we're seeing more local wineries do that. I'm not saying one or the other is better. There's different ways of doing it, but it's an interesting point because you can have a 7, 8, 9 alcohol wine that, to Brett's point on the email, doesn't get you most people drunk in a glass or two, and it's still great. Like, you have options as a winemaker, don't you?
yeah, for sure. There's options in the winery and in the vineyard. So our climate in general sets us up to not have really high alcohol wines. But then we also have a little control over how ripe we let the grapes get in the vineyard. The more ripe they are, the more potential alcohol there is. The less ripe, the kind of more crisp and refreshing and low alcohol they are. So we have control over that aspect. But then, like you said, once we get the grapes into the winery, we can control kind of the balance of sweetness and alcohol level. And we tend to make our wines on a spectrum. So some of them ferment a little bit more dry, have a little bit more pizzazz and a little bit more alcohol. But then some of the other ones are a little bit more delicate, a little bit more sweet, less high alcohol. So we have a range that appeals to a broad range of consumers, including people that are looking to have something a little bit lighter.
And the reason that there's a lot more alcohol in a lot of wines these days, especially international wines, European wines, California wines, is a combination of factors. It's not just climate change, although climate change has made for a lot more growing degree days and longer seasons, but it's also critical preference. I mean, the 80s and 90s, when the Robert Parkers of the world were given big scores to these big, big wines that tasted like brownie sundaes, well, then people were trying to make wines that tasted like brownie sundaes, and maybe that's what people like. But that's how you ended up going from 12% alcohol wines in France and California a generation ago to 14 and 15% today. And people like Brett, he might be 25 years old going, why do I want that? I don't think I want that. And Brett, I would just say, I get it. It's just you happen to be in a region where you don't get a whole lot of 15% alcohol wines. And you have a pretty big advantage if that's what you're looking for, Brett. Like this sounds like me being a homer, but it's not. There's a lot of wines in the range that people like him are looking for. Fair?
Yeah, and I think that good wineries and good businesses kind of pay attention to what their customers want. And if the trend is going to be to have some like lighter, more nuanced wines, then I think that the strong wineries and the Finger Lakes are going to be able to react to that and create what people are looking for.
Connie writes in, Chad, I'm going to kick this one to you. Connie says, when I lived in Germany, one of the biggest festivals in the Rheingau, which is a wine growing region, every year it was the May wine celebration, when the herb Waldmeister, sweet woodruff, was added to the new Riesling wines to create the most delicious white wine drink you've ever tasted. Sweet woodruff grows easily in my garden, so there's plenty of that herb available here. I know the German Rieslings are a lot sweeter, but perhaps the Finger Lakes wineries could adapt their wines to this tradition. It would be a great way to begin the Finger Lakes winery season. That's from Connie. First of all, Connie, I want that drink. I want you to tell me how to grow sweet woodruff, and I want to try it. Second of all, German wines in your mind may be sweeter, but there are dry German wines. There are dry German Rieslings. There are very sweet. There's all different levels in between. Same with the Finger Lakes. And Chad, what do you make of her point about not only the festival season, but the idea that people were looking for something sweet, probably easy to drink, lower alcohol, kind of dovetails with Brett's email. What do you think, Chad?
Well, I think the larger market really is demanding a pretty wide variety of style from Riesling, and I think that's why you see that coming from the Finger Lakes predominantly, right? You can find a very sweet dessert style Riesling up to a very high acid, crisp, bone dry, almost 0% residual sugar Riesling coming from the Finger Lakes. So I think we've got it covered in that regard. As far as festivals go, also, I think the Finger Lakes does a phenomenal job of selling its brand. And I think the brand of the Finger Lakes is come to us and celebrate with us and enjoy what we have to offer, both in, wine style and product, but also just the views and the music and the food scene, right? I mean, I don't know of a weekend during peak season in the Finger Lakes that you can't go from one end of the lake to the other on any one of the lakes and find 50 things that are going on. It's a very active scene in our area. And that's kicking off earlier and staying on later every year in the region. So to her point, I mean, escaping the Sweet Woodruff part, because I'm not familiar with that, and I would love to try it. I think we've got her covered. A ton of sweet Rieslings, a ton of more classic, well-balanced between sugars, acids, and alcohols, and then a really nice wide variety of dry to bone dry Rieslings are coming from the region. And that's why we're so successful with that particular grape, right? It's pretty versatile and can make a really wide style of wine. So
I think there's a little irony here, Chad, which is that when the critics were putting out all those big gaudy point scores, and 20 years ago when Finger Lakes wineries were trying to figure out, like, how do we get scores in the 90s? How do we get the big magazines to cover us? There were conversations like, I would go into taste rooms and people would say, like, oh, reds are like Napa. And I'm like, why would you even know? Also, like,
right.
It seemed really disjointed, but I understood what people were chasing. But now, like, the irony is, this is a region. These are the kinds of wine regions that are actually pretty well positioned to give the market more of what they say they want, which is lower alcohol, but really, really high quality stuff that you're not going to get hammered on if you drink a glass or two, stuff that you can, places you can go and visit in person, because even though we're all digital and we're on our phones and we're disconnected, people want to be together in person. They want to be together for events, which we're going to be talking about coming up here. I think the irony is that all the things the region might have thought it had to chase 25 years ago, it didn't have to do that. And it might be pretty well positioned to survive and thrive after all. I mean, is that me being a homer or being too optimistic, Chad?
No, I think you're spot on, Evan. I think that, the majority of wineries in the region are producing world-class boutique-style wines that the majority of people would embrace and really enjoy. I think the day of the big over-extracted, hot and heavy, hot climate reds are kind of waning, and people are looking for the precise products that we're producing, whether it be a lower alcohol, well-balanced, very aromatic white wine, or a more medium-bodied, very food-friendly dry red like Cab Franc, which the area is seeing a lot of success with.
Yeah.
We've got it nailed, and we have a pretty wide variety of grapes that we can grow in the region, and we are growing and producing high-quality wines, whether it's, Gewürztraminer, Grüne Veltliner, some hybrids like Vidal and Keuka White, and those are so versatile and can make such a wide variety of wines that we really are in a unique position that if you are at all a wine lover or even, adjacent to wine loving, you can come to this region and really walk away with some big wins, I believe. The story in my book is, getting out of the direct Finger Lakes region and still selling that story and telling people, in the capital region, let's say, or in New York City, that's, you're looking for that, and we have it, right? So that's, I think, maybe our challenge moving forward to ride out of this dip, is just to remind people that we're in your backyard and we're making precisely what you're claiming you want. So let's sit down and try it,
Patrick writes in to say, Sweet Woodruff, the plant, is in Rochester in abundance for you home winemakers. He says it's a ground cover, more of a petite ground cover. It can become robust. It stays about ankle high. It has sweet smelling little white flowers, perhaps like the dandelion, the majority or all of it is consumable. So thank you, Patrick. Look at all the things you're learning. When we come back from our only break, we're going to put the question to these guys. What are you most excited about that you're offering now? Because this is a hard time for the region. But at the same time, all of our guests have thought about that. And they've thought about not only what business model can work here, but what fires you up. You heard Matt talking a little bit about events on Sundays and events with kids and families. And Brian's going to talk about how they're bringing music and bringing hospitality and people in at Point of the Bluff. So Brian Durnin from Point of the Bluff Vineyards is here, Matt Cassavaugh from 20 Deep Winery, Chad Hendrickson from Keuka Spring Vineyards, and we'll come right back on Connections. This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. On YouTube, Chris says some wineries are starting to come around on offering juice, but it's still mostly marketed to kids rather than a mature craft NA option for adults. And Sydney was asking, why not offer free-run pressed juice at the winery, at the cafe or restaurants, or for sale? Is it too risky? I like that idea. Okay, so Matt Cassavaugh. By the way, when you say free-run juice, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so wine starts as grape juice. And if you visit 20 Deep during harvest, you're likely to come in and sit down at the tasting bar, and if we're pressing juice, we'll pull some off and let people taste it. Also, if we have fermentations going on where the wine is part way between juice and finished wine, we'll let people taste that too. And it's
cool.
an interesting experience, to see it as it develops.
Yeah, so you like this idea. You're down with the YouTube comments there.
I do, yeah. I don't know if we're going to be able to export Riesling juice to Canada per se, but it's a cool experience and it is fun to taste.
It is not like the grape juice you've had in stores growing up, by the way.
It's not, no.
It's really good.
And a lot of times it's not really like the finished wine either.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the flavors in the wine come from actually the fermentation and the yeast. So you can taste grape juice and it tastes one way, and then the finished wine tastes completely different. And it's interesting to taste it throughout the process so you can kind of develop the through line.
Yeah, and boy, this sparked a lot of comments there. Chris was saying on YouTube that Fulkerson Winery, for example, has pressed juices, Rieslings, Diamond, its Sauvignons, and more. Cool stuff there. Brian, what do you think of that?
Yeah, we do sample some of the juice as well. We have some events happening throughout harvest where we bring people in and kind of show them the different phases of the winemaking process. We haven't bottled anything yet, and I think a lot of wineries avoid doing it because of the approval process. Being a farm winery, our products need to be over a certain alcohol percentage to bottle them. I think it's 6%. Bottling juice, we'd need to go through the FDA, and I think a lot of small businesses just don't want to deal with it.
Okay. Chad, what do you think?
I would agree that I think the concept's great. The getting it, Fulkerson's worked very hard to get juice in the glass and having it, be shelf stable. I think free run during harvest, yeah, that's great. Putting it into a bottle and putting it on the shelf is a very difficult process to go through that a lot of wineries are not really equipped to do.
Mm-hmm.
But as time moves on and we find ways to pivot and attract people, that's probably certainly something that we should all discuss in our own various ways. So,
Dave on YouTube says German Rieslings have been in the 9 to 11% alcohol range for hundreds of years. That's exactly right, Dave. I mean, you'll see even lower, and for the reasons we talked about. Another comment on YouTube: I'm doing my part to help the Finger Lakes industry. I just sent a pretty big deposit check to a Seneca Lake winery for my wedding next summer. That's still a big business, I'm sure. But here's another comment from YouTube. So, viewer says, I think it's short-sighted to bank on the fact that this might just be an ebb and flow. There are so many indicators that point to the fact that a cultural shift with lasting change is happening. It's sad to see so many alcohol producers say, don't worry, it'll just get better, rather than read the clear writing on the wall. To that commenter, I would say, I don't think anybody on the program is just saying, just sort of wait and do nothing, and it'll magically get better. I think there's an acknowledgement that there is that cultural shift is real. Those numbers are real. No one's discounting them. There always is a little bit of an ebb and flow when it comes to alcohol consumption, and that's over centuries, by the way. I mean, alcohol is not a new thing. But to the extent that there's a more permanent shift, I guess I'll be the cheerleader and say that's why I think this region's actually in pretty good shape, because the permanent shift that the commenter is talking about is saying people want lower or no alcohol wines. And this is a region that can do that. People want, more experience, more in person. This is a region that can do that. So, I sound like a cheerleader, and I don't mean to be, but I think it's fair to ask, Brian, do you think that your industry needs to grapple more with the fact that what's happening now might not just be a 2 or 3 year thing? Like this may be a somewhat permanent shift.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption based on the way things have been going and moving. That's business, though. I mean, any business needs to grapple every year, every day with changes that happen. And I think the Finger Lakes are positioned really well to do that. I mean, every winter we have a challenge. Every summer we have a challenge with weather, changing weather patterns now. I think we're not banking on the fact that we're going to return to 2022, 2023 numbers based on what they are. We need to pivot like we pivoted every year in business.
Okay, Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that because the Finger Lakes is made up of small wineries, it gives us a little bit more room to kind of adapt to that. It gives us a little bit more room to do things like make connections that matter with people and sell experiences. And we have plenty of people to draw from still. I mean, we're close to Rochester, we're close to Buffalo, we're close to Syracuse, New York Metro is only a drive away. And there's a lot of people to draw from in that area. So I think that we're going to continue to see foot traffic through our tasting rooms, whether or not there's less general alcohol consumption going on. I think the wine industry has always been good at big events and big occasions and pop a glass of champagne for, New Year's Eve and get married on Seneca Lake. We've always kind of been good at that. I think the wine industry has room, though, to pivot and become more of a part of people's everyday life. And I think that these lower alcohols and these more refreshing products that the Finger Lakes make and specialize in really kind of lend themselves well to that. So,
Chad Hendrickson, you want to add to that?
No, I would agree. I think, I mentioned ebbed and flowed, and I think that we're not going to get to those pandemic numbers of gigantic, huge sales ever again. And I think that we're all comfortable in knowing that. I do, though, think that, like everyone else has said, that we're positioned well to meet the market where it is. We've traditionally made, low intervention, lower alcohol, aromatic wines that people now claiming are what they're looking for. And I think that we're also positioned well to make even lower alcohol wines or meet people where they are. But I don't think alcohol consumption is going to go away, right? I think that our market may shift. It certainly is. And I would agree that it's probably somewhat of a permanent shift, but we're still here and we will continue to be here.
All right, so let me grab a phone call, and we're going to talk this phone call will talk a little about music, which is one thing that we are going to talk about in a moment here. Maureen in Honeoye Falls. Hi, Maureen, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. First, let me say I'm a huge fan of Finger Lakes wineries. I visit and I buy local when I'm in the liquor store. So I'm gluten-free, and any winery that has a gluten-free option on their snacks or food always gets my business. It's not really very hard to have a gluten-free cracker individually packaged, shelf-stable, so that you can offer that on a charcuterie board. And then any food trucks that come, it would be lovely to have a gluten-free option available. And then the other is just a comment that I love the live music. It really adds to the vibe. When you get live music in a closed, small room with concrete walls and a concrete floor and an amp, it almost ruins the experience because it's so loud that you can't understand the music and you can't have a conversation with the person next to you. The bartender can't hear you. So those are just my thoughts. Thanks.
Maureen, thank you. So let's start with the music question there. Maureen's talking about she likes the vibe of music. She wants to maybe more outdoors. How's that fit for you guys, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of music that happens. We have a full concert series. I think what Maureen's talking about is more at our tasting room. During the weekends, we have music, and inevitably there's always people who want us to turn the music up or turn the music down. My wife and I will go places and experience the same thing. I love it. I think it's great, and she thinks it's too loud. So, I think it's a personal preference sometimes. But yeah, music's a big part of, I think, building those experiences and just creating a vibe.
All right, so let me do a little pitching for you because, I've seen the lists of who you've had at Point of the Bluff in recent years.
Yes.
And I said it's really impressed me. And so, Julie wrote in to say, I've got tickets to 2 shows at Point of the Bluff this year. And as a cranky old woman, I love that they're at 3:30.
Yes.
So there,
yeah.
there you go. Who are some of the names you've had over the years?
Over the years, wow, I've prepped for this year. Let me think.
Well, go ahead.
For the past few years, biggest ones, Daryl Hall was there last year. That was a great show. This year, we have Band of Horses coming, which is going to be amazing. I'm a huge fan. So
Did you have Indigo Girls?
Yeah, Indigo Girls.
You've had Indigo Girls?
Yep. We've had Three Dog Night there. They're coming back this year. Little River Band. Ben Folds has been there. He's coming back.
Who are you most excited about this year?
Band of Horses is going to be a pretty awesome show for us. Hanson. I mean, I'm 36. Hanson
is
was
coming to Point of the Bluff this year.
Yes. And let me tell you, Hanson has been our most viral show that we've ever put on sale, which
people are still bopping.
It's wild. I was in our tasting room, which gets a lot of phone calls about concerts, the day that Hanson announced, and we were actually trying to interview somebody, and the phone would not stop ringing with people calling and asking when the tickets would go on sale or what they could do for tickets, and it just is shocking to me. But yes, Hanson. So,
I mean, look, I'm the guy who just said bop, but they've got a song called Georgia. They've got really good stuff. Okay, so it's not just bop.
Yeah.
Okay. How important is it to your business model that you have a venue that you can attract literally national names?
Yeah. At this point, it's critically important. We're a diversified business, and we'd love to say that every profit center is, doing well year over year, but being diversified, it really helps that, some areas have a good year and other areas have a bad year. Concerts, though, we're hoping to see about 35,000 people through the venue this year. So selling either wine to them, which would be great, or beer or an NA cocktail.
Brian, people are listening to this going like, who are you? Where are you? Where's Point of the Bluff?
Pulteney, New York, which is on Keuka Lake, Hammondsport. Check us out. pointofthebluffvineyards.com, concerts at Point of the Bluff. It's a pretty stellar lineup. So. And
how many people can you accommodate in the audience for one event?
So historically, we've done shows in our reclaimed lumber pavilion and tent where we have 900 seats and 400 GA, and so 1,300 there. The photo that's up on the screen now.
If you're watching on YouTube,
yes,
yep.
Obviously you can't see that on the radio, but that is our outdoor vineyard stage, so we're hoping to get 2,500 people there for a few of our bigger shows this year.
And you see the Point of the Bluff in the distance.
Yes.
So it maybe used to be a supplemental part of the business. Now it's really key during these hard times, and you're bringing in these big names. Matt Cassavaugh, about 45 seconds. You guys are in cruising altitude. Any changes you're going to make to your business to deal with changes in the marketplace?
I don't think so, Evan. I think that we're going to always keep an open mind, but we're going to try to lean into our strength, which is just meeting people with a smile when they walk in the door. We always have events and things going on at the winery that help us bring in new customers, but also reconnect with customers that we've already met before. So we're going to keep our strengths, I think.
Okay, Chad Hendrickson at Keuka Spring Vineyards. What's the future hold, and how are you going to pivot if you need to?
Well, I think we've done an excellent job of creating an atmosphere that reflects the wine style at the winery. Like we have a world-class winemaker and winemaking team, and the wines that are available now are very expressive, and people seem to really enjoy them. We have a beautiful outdoor venue at the winery that has a great view of the lake and all sorts of stuff. We have live music there all the time through the season. Beautiful outdoor tasting bar. an on-site food venue as well. So, people can come and stay and enjoy themselves on site. We have a whole bunch of stuff coming up, up our sleeve to try and meet people where they're at. And I'm excited to see what the season brings. We're also really trying to meet people in market too. That's a really strong move for us this season. Going around and doing tastings and all that. So we're excited by the season, and please come and visit us.
All three of our guests and all three of the wineries they represent have said to me at various points, online or offline, how important it is that people don't feel like their industry is some sort of higher-end, unreachable thing, that it is for everybody. And that's the challenge going forward, and I know they're working on it. Connections team field trip to Hanson, Chris Nessel says. Is Hanson sold out?
Not yet. Never will be for you.
There might be a Connections team field trip coming up here.
Live show.
Brian Durnin from Point of the Bluff. Good luck to you guys. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Matt Cassavaugh, 20 Deep. Thanks for being here.
Thanks a lot.
Chad Hendrickson, Keuka Spring Vineyards. Thank you, Chad.
Thanks for having me.
What a great group here. And from all of us at Connections, thanks. We'll talk to you tomorrow on member-supported public media.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.